Well, hello. Welcome back, everyone. Today is Module 2 of Principles of Clinical Level Self-Care with David Crow. My name is Sherry. I'll be your host for today's session. As always, we warmly invite you to submit questions as we go through class through the Zoom chat, and the chat function is available at the bottom of your Zoom window. In a moment, it will be set to host only. So please do send your questions to me, Sherry, and I'll be gathering the questions and adding them to the place where David can easily see them and access them. We also warmly invite you to join us on video, and we would also like to remind you that once your video is turned on, you are visible by everyone in the session at any time. So please do turn off your video at times when you would not like to be seen or when you may be moving around or eating, or if there are any other distractions in your background. To turn your video on and off, just click or tap the video camera icon on your screen. So it's in the bottom left corner of your screen, or if you tap your mobile device, it'll be along the bottom there. Now there are two different views. There's speaker view and gallery view. Most of you have probably used this before. You can control that in the upper right hand corner of your Zoom window. If you click on view, you'll see two options, speaker and gallery, and you can move between those two views. Gallery view allows you to see everyone, and speaker view keeps you focused on the person who's speaking. So this will be David. We do recommend staying in speaker view while David is teaching. So you'll be muted throughout the session unless you're called on to ask a question, and I'll send you an invite to unmute when that happens. Please do use headphones or a headset to minimize background noise and to ensure the best quality sound and recording. And finally, if the session should freeze up on you, simply click the red Leave button in the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom window. If you're on iPad or mobile, just tap your screen and you'll see the Leave Meeting option there. And then once you've left the meeting, quit all other programs and apps that may be running and use the same link to reconnect with the session. The same thing applies if you have any audio issues or if you get disconnected completely. Just shut everything down on your computer. You might even have to shut down and restart. That usually solves any problems. And then come on back in and join us. All right, David, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Sherry, again. And welcome back to everybody. I hope you've had a good week. And today is Module 2 in our 5-week series. And our topic today is internet medicine. And here we are on Zoom. So this is going to be all about some of the advantages and disadvantages of this new age of medicine and information that is now available to us. And of course, that's why we're all here, because if it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for Zoom, we wouldn't be meeting. And if it wasn't for the internet, we wouldn't have this explosion of natural medicine that's happening. We wouldn't have a lot of other things also. But this is going to be a review of some of the main resources that I have put together over the last decades, actually. And some of that goes back to the early days of the internet, but it also goes back even farther than that, because some of the people and organizations, herb companies, and educational resources that I'll be sharing with you started quite a while ago. And what this is going to do is save you a lot of time. It will basically give you in one place a lot of information. And all this information is going to be pretty reliable. And that's going to be one of the main objectives of this class, is sorting out a huge amount of confusion about what's good and what's questionable and so forth. And we'll do a few reviews of some things just to get a sense of, okay, this is how we develop critical thinking with this particular diagnosis or this kind of information and so forth. But really it's just giving you the most valuable resources that I know about. There's no point in spending any time really looking at all the questionable things that are out there because there's so much of that. But I will give you, actually, there's one website that's kind of fun too. Question, talk bad about, but we'll just use everything as an opportunity to develop our discriminating intelligence, as it were. And that's one of the main exercises that we want to do with this. So this will just save you a lot of time. In the next 2 hours, I'll give you enough information, context, links to good, reliable people and organizations and products and all of that. And in that sense, we don't even have to worry about some of the questions about, well, what are good sources and good products. I'll just tell you. Now, some of you probably know some of this, and especially if you've been working in the field of natural medicine, you do. But I doubt if all of you know all of this, and so there's probably some information that's new for you. Now, before we actually jump in to our main topic, the risks and benefits of internet medicine, there were a few things left over from last week that I wanted to carry through on. And also to start us off by reminding everybody that you have 2 files that are posted. One is the remaining questions from the Q&A from last week. And as usual, there wasn't enough time to answer everything. So I do answer everything, and it's there on the file. And thank you for sending in the good questions and comments. If you have other questions and comments, feel free to post them as we go in the chat. I will get them. We'll talk about them at the end of class. And I am particularly curious about some of your explorations from the first class. And there was one homework assignment specifically that I gave that I'm interested to hear about, and that was your exploration with the Ayurvedic body constitution, your Ayurvedic body type. And I gave several links to different places. So you already know a whole bunch of different sites that are devoted down to Ayurveda. And we'll review a couple of those and a few new ones to really delve into what's valuable about these sites and why. But several of you posted comments, and I didn't repeat them on the file. I just will answer them sort of as one collective question, which is, this is terribly confusing. I have never been able to figure out my body type. Several of you mentioned that. And this is the weakness of this particular system. And that was the question. That was the homework that I was asking. What are the strengths and weaknesses of this particular system of diagnosis? And keep in mind that that's all it is. It's just a system of diagnosis and treatment. And it is very similar in a lot of ways to the diagnostic concepts and principles of Chinese medicine and Tibetan medicine and classical medicine in general. Even early Western medicine had a lot of these principles as well. Now, these principles are based on the observation of how nature works in the body. And these medical systems came over a very long period of time, this kind of thinking about our body type and whether we're hot and cold or dry and moist and so forth, deficient and excess, all of these things developed over a long period of time as a way of helping to understand what was going on. Now, it is certainly not as sophisticated a diagnostic system as some things, but in another way, it's very sophisticated. And this is something that we'll look at in more detail next week when we compare some of the strengths and weaknesses of allopathic medicine and traditional medicine. So with allopathic medicine, we have these technologies to visualize things now that we've never had before. MRIs and X-rays are, X-rays have been around for a while, but they're still relatively new. But in the past, these tools and microbiology and understanding infections and all these kind of things were not possible at the technological levels that we have now, but people still understood a lot of things And what really matters is that one of the strongest points of traditional botanical medicine, classical Asian medicine, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, these systems were fundamentally non-toxic and fundamentally rejuvenative and detoxifying by nature, you see. And those two principles of rejuvenation and detoxification are absolutely fundamental to healing. And that's the great deficiency of allopathic medicine, is there's no drugs that will do that. There are no drugs that will detoxify or to rejuvenate. And many of you have heard me say that many times, but that's really the main problem. And that's why natural medicine is so important now, because you can't really rebuild your health in a toxic, stressed out world, just taking more pharmaceutical drugs. So the question then about, well, what body type am I? And how much does it really matter? And what do we do with this information? There are levels and levels of understanding with this, okay? And what I will say is that there are benefits that we can derive from this system fairly quickly, actually, if we just understand some simple principles. But on the other hand, to really delve into this requires a lifetime of training and experience, because it's organoleptic. And what that means is that you have to be at an extremely high level of diagnostic skills to really fully apply this. But there are stories about these kind of people who can do these things. And that's at the other end of the spectrum. So there's, at the one end, there's the basic information that almost everybody in India understands. I mean, the language of Vata Pitta Kapha is part of the culture. And it's a real simple thing to apply at a beginning level. And that's why I introduced it, is because it's just a diagnostic system, and we're learning diagnostic systems. And we're learning the strengths and weaknesses of different diagnostic systems, and we're learning about how to understand ourselves. And this is just a way to understand ourselves, that's all. But in order to really use it as a primary diagnostic method, then you have to really practice and you have to really be an expert. And when you do that, then you can diagnose to the same level in many cases as allopathic doctors. So I'll tell you a couple of quick stories about this just so you can understand the higher level, and then we'll look at what does it mean for us. Well, it reminds me of a saying you probably have heard of, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the guru of the Beatles. Well, he was once asked, is astrology real? And he thought about it for a minute, and he said, yes, it's real, but there's only about 5 people in the world who really know how to do it. And really advanced Ayurvedic diagnosis is kind of like this also. It's real, and there's very few people who can really do it. And I will mention that Dr. Lad at the Ayurvedic Institute is one of those few individuals. And I will also tell you a story about the Dalai Lama's physician, Dr. Yeshit Dundan. And he was brought into a hospital in the US at one point. He was on a teaching tour, and some doctors invited him to come and demonstrate pulse diagnosis. And they gave him a very difficult case. And he did nothing except listen to the pulses. And he diagnosed the case correctly. And the doctors were amazed. It was something like endocarditis or something like that. And he was able to diagnose at such a level that demonstrated that we have the capacity, if we have the training in medicine and understand the principles of what we're feeling in the pulse, and we have the skill, the observational skill, and the decades of experience, we have the ability to actually see diagnostically, perceive diagnostically at similar levels as technology. So this is a skill that used to be more common because doctors had to rely on it more. And when doctors had to rely more on their own senses, they paid more attention to their patients in a lot of ways, because now you don't even have to look at your patient. You just order the tests, and you know, it's very objective, but it doesn't tell you some fundamental things about their body type. And that's the piece that's missing, because there's a lot of helpful information about understanding our constitution, and that's how we can personalize medicine. You said was one of the main reasons that I provided that, is because this is a system where we can take something that's generic and we can personalize it. And so if you have a certain disease diagnosis, well, you can have that disease diagnosis and you can have all kinds of variations in your body type. And so let's say you just have hypertension, essential hypertension, you have high blood pressure and you don't know why. Well, you can be a Vata person, a Pitta person, and a Kapha person. And what that does is it changes how it's treated. And so in a Vata person, the variables are treated to help basically treat your constitution. And that's what will help to manage the hypertension. And likewise, hypertension with Pitta people is a different disease in Ayurveda, really. So this is a system where we look very much at the individual. Now, that's really at a medical level, and it's pretty sophisticated. What's most important is that there's something we can do with this information. You know, this is not just fun things to talk about, like after yoga class, you know, like, what's your constitution? Well, it's meaningful at a physical level, dietary level. And that's why I presented it in the first module on our self-care routines, because our self-care routines are pretty simple to adjust according to our body types. And you should know at this point, from the tests that you did, a basic idea of whether you are more Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, or some blend of two, or maybe you're tridoshic, all three. And that's okay. What matters and where it becomes really important is when you have a real clear constitution, all right? A lot of times it's not that easy to see it because it's not clearly defined. There's a mixture. And really there's no right or wrong about this. You can be a classic Vata person, thin, underweight, dry, tendency towards nervousness, all these kind of things, all the things that you found taking the test. You can have that kind of constitution, and at the same time, you can be very healthy, okay? It just means that there's going to be a kind of tendency for things to go in a particular way. But then on the other hand, you may have a mixture and be unhealthy. So it's not really a matter of, well, this body type is better than this. It's not the body type that's so important. What matters is your health. That's all. And the body type gives us certain guidelines in how we might be able to take care of ourselves. So once we understand, all right, I have certain Vata tendencies, then you can understand that doing warm oil oleation of your body before you get in a bath is actually a primary treatment for you. And if you understand that you are a Kapha body type, you can understand that you have to be more aware of the long-term consequences of eating a lot of comfort food and not getting enough exercise, because you're already metabolically set up for that, okay, for metabolic syndrome. So that's how we can apply this. Now, where it really starts to make much more sense is when we start to see that herbs and products are described in that language. And one of the sites that we'll look at is Banyan Botanicals, and I'll give you a quick tour of, okay, here's a company, and they describe everything in terms of Vata Pitta Kapha. And so if you have a basic body type analysis, then you can plug that into the Ayurvedic system. So this is a complete study. I mean, this is the study of Ayurvedic medicine. And the reason that I brought this out in Module 1 is because I would say that this is actually more common in popular culture as a diagnostic system than Chinese medicine. And Chinese medicine has its own diagnostic language also. And so you may be familiar with the term of liver qi stagnation, which is basically what it feels like when you have PMS, and a kind of compressed emotionality, irritability, nothing's right. And then you go get some movement, exercise vigorously, the period starts, you feel better, all right? So there's nothing really that's a counterpart in Western medicine to liver qi stagnation, but liver qi stagnation is a real thing, and it's an entity. And furthermore, it can be a primary complaint in the clinic. So in the clinic, then what do? I mean, allopathic medicine for treating PMS doesn't really offer that much. I mean, if it's bad, they may just say, well, go on birth control pills. But the point is that there's all of these herbs that fit that diagnosis. And that's what's important about this, is that if you have a diagnosis of liver qi stagnation, there's a category of herbs that treat liver qi stagnation. And it doesn't matter if your blood work is fine, it doesn't show anything, you don't feel right, and here's these herbs that are known to help you feel better if you have this set of symptoms, all right? So that's what's important about it. And of course, how long does it take to learn Ayurvedic medicine? Well, it takes years and years. But what's important here is that in popular culture, people are starting to learn Ayurveda. And in popular culture, people are starting to learn a lot of Western medicine also. And this is great, but it's also why we're here in this particular class today, because it's mostly happening through the internet, and that means it's confusing. So what we want to do then is just go a step at a time. And I know that some of you are already far advanced in your Ayurvedic studies and your Chinese medicine studies or your allopathic medical practice. You know, I mean, there are many of you that are practitioners at all kinds of levels. So what we want to do is just take the things that are most important to us, most practical to us, and incorporate them and learn more and more about ourselves. All right, so there was another question. I hope that's helpful as a quick overview. And there was another question that I didn't answer in the Q&A, and that has to do with interpreting the lab tests. Now, you'll remember interpreting the lab tests is doing the blood work is really, it's a simplistic tool, but it can show some very helpful things. And a few principles, just to review quickly. If you get your blood work, before you open up the file to find out what you have, just take a few deep breaths, because they can be very anxiety producing for people to see, oh, this is flagged as high and this is low. But just keep it in perspective, all right? That what you're looking for is you're looking for long-term trends. You're looking for either long-term trends or you're looking for something that's really important right now, okay? Short-term important information. And if you're looking for long-term trends, then you can do the blood testing once a year or something like that. And if you're conscious of it, then it gives you a diagnostic parameter to focus on certain kinds of things. And you have a goal, actually. It can be very helpful as a motivating factor to say, all right, I'm gonna dedicate myself to getting my cholesterol down. Well, that's great. That just means that you're more health conscious and you have a specific target and you're looking at that. And as long as you do the test the next year and the cholesterol is at least moving in the right direction, then that's probably sufficient, unless it's really alarmingly high. And that's the other thing, is that if there is something that's really alarmingly high, it's good to know about it. You might as well just get alarmed about it, because there's a process that everybody goes through, and that is that nobody likes bad news about their health, and nobody likes to do medical procedures. I know that there are some people actually, they do like spending a lot of time at the doctor, but I think they're kind of a unique case. And for the rest of us, I think it's fairly safe to say that when we get bad news medically, that it takes time to metabolize it, because then it means that we have to adjust our thinking, we have to adjust our schedule, we have to plan our finances, we got to go into, all this stuff, and it's not pleasant. And that's really good motivation to take care of ourselves. That's the main motivating reason why we should really be implementing those self-care routines at higher and higher levels, especially as we get older, so that we can practice preventive medicine more and more. It's more and more urgently crucial that we practice preventive medicine. So the blood work then is just a foundation level of information. And the main question is, well, what do I do with this information? Okay, well, that's a good question. And I didn't really explain it. And it's not that difficult. All you have to do is just get your file, see what your blood work is. And let's say that you have a high reading of something. Well, just take that high reading and just plug it right into Google. That's all you have to do. I mean, just say A1C is high. Just use that as your keyword, A1C high. There it is, it's gonna come up. And it's basically going to tell you, it means this. And that's all that you need to start with, okay? So that's how we can use the internet for basic research. We give a little blood, we get the results back, we see, okay, now is there anything that's really, really off the charts here? And if there is, and you haven't seen it before, then do a little research on that, okay? And then if it doesn't make sense, you don't know what it is, then you have to escalate your research to the next level and really start looking into this. And that's where some of the resources I'll share with you today about database research and so forth, that's where we can get more in-depth information. Okay. So that's a quick overview about that. And I also wanted to review a file that we didn't touch on. This is a little complicated, but you might have seen it and been curious. And this is the 6 stages of disease, according to Ayurveda. And so this is advanced Ayurvedic medicine, but it has good terminology to help you understand more about Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And it also is relevant to what we were talking about last week of how different systems affect each other, okay? And there were some good questions and comments that came in from people asking about things that are in this topic. For example, what do we do about treating sinus infections that came from root canals? All right, that's a classic example. But there's also a lot of other things, and I did mention a lot of these systems last week: gut-brain axis, or gut musculoskeletal inflammation connection, things like that. And in Ayurveda, this is clearly outlined and well known. And in a certain way, this is more sophisticated at a holistic constitutional level than what modern medicine understands yet. And that's how these two medical systems are approaching each other and are going to be meeting each other at some point. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on the screen share here for a moment. So there are 2 parts of this. And the first part is just a summation of the second part. And the first part is really all you need to know, unless you're really interested in a lot of advanced terminology. So the 6 stages. And this is basically that the humors, what are the humors? Well, the humors are Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Okay, those are systems. The humors are aggravated. Vata, Pitta, and Kapha become aggravated by internal factors and external factors. And this is right here, a very important principle. So what are internal factors and what are external factors? Well, external factors are all the things that are happening in the world that may affect us. Like, for example, the weather. If you are living in the Gulf Coast area, you are now having your fifth hurricane in like 2 months or something like that. You see, so external factors, or if you're in the Western states, you're exposed to a lot of smoke in a lot of areas. These are external factors. Internal factors have to do with our lifestyle. They have to do with our moods and emotions and our biorhythms and our diet and things like that. And because these things are disturbed, because Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are disturbed because of internal and external factors, you know, if the external factors, if the seasons were always perfect and the weather was always great and there were no stress factors externally or internally, then the body would be in a state of natural equilibrium. But things throw us off balance, and that's what is meant by external and internal. And the way that this tends to happen is that the main systems in the digestive tract are imbalanced first. And so the first thing that tends to happen is that we get an increase of mucus. And that generally happens more in the upper GI and in the chest. Or we tend to become more acidic, and that tends to happen more in the small intestine. Or we tend to become more gaseous, and that tends to happen more in the colon. Now, the important thing to remember here is that one of these can be predominant, and it will manifest as a predominant kind of symptom. So, for example, if Pitta is increasing, it's going to manifest as something like GERD, okay, acidity. Whereas if Vata is increasing in the colon, it may manifest as something like irritable bowel syndrome. But it can also manifest kind of all combined together, all right? And there's no fixed way that this happens. Things happen in all kinds of individual ways. But the point that's important to remember is that external and internal factors create these accumulations of these various toxins in the body first. Then from that comes the second stage of the disease process, which is weakening of the digestive fire. That's what Agni means, okay? And that can be weakened because of the accumulation of any of these three previous situations. Now, from that comes increased ama, and ama means undigested waste material. Then the ama, the undigested waste material of different types, mixes with the different types of the aggravated humors. And they increase at their respective sites. And so what that means is that undigested waste mixes with the gas in the colon. Undigested waste mixes with the acidity in the small intestine and stomach. Undigested waste mixes with the mucus of the stomach and lungs. Now, that's stage 4. And then stage 5, this accumulation of undigested waste products with the Vata Pitta Kapha is then provoked further by external and internal factors, and they begin to spread out of the GI tract, and they go to the weakened areas of the body. All right. Now, all of that happens before there's actually a disease. Okay. And then something manifests. And when the disease manifests, then you can find something in your blood work. And then the doctor is going to tell you, oh, okay, let's run some some tests to see about your inflammatory markers for autoimmune condition. And then you can start to see something. But here's the thing that's brilliant about this particular system is that it's telling us all the different things that happen before we get sick. Okay. And what that does, it allows us an entry point into treating disease preventively before it manifests. So in other words, if you start to have imbalances in your digestive tract that you are aware of, take care of them then so that they don't progress to the second stage where they start to actually weaken the digestive power, the digestive fire, the Agni. Because if it gets to that stage, then the undigested pathogenic waste is going to start to build up. And this is usually about at this stage when people start to notice that, oh, something's not right. They start to notice that they got the stagnation in the digestive tract, they got the thick tongue coating, they got the brain fog, they're starting to notice the gut-brain axis more, they're starting to notice the food sensitivities. This is in a certain way, this is like the universal disease, all right? And as we go through the class and I'm telling you some of these sort of trendy wastebasket diagnoses, I mean, we can take all of natural medicine in a certain way and say that everybody's got 6 main conditions now, and they all kind of go back to this, all right? So I just wanted to point this out as part of the self-routines. The reason that this is important in terms of our self-care routines is because what we want to be able to do, ideally, is resolve and reverse the disease process in such a way that we can maintain the healthy digestive function so that it actually brings back, it draws back the metabolic waste into the gut and eliminates it. Okay, and this is a principle. This principle here is basically saying the digestive system is the root of all disease. Well, it's obviously not the root of all disease, but it's the root of a lot of disease. And actually the science is now coming out that there's more and more truth to this. So autoimmune conditions, like they're finding, like rheumatoid arthritis, there's a link to the gut microbiome, you see. So there's a lot of very important information here that has to do with how do we manage our Vata Pitta Kapha? How do we manage our digestive fire? How do we manage the ama that's building up in our system? And that's where in popular culture now, we have an increased amount of awareness, but we also have an increased amount of confusion. So I can tell you that, it's probably quite accurate to say that back in the 50s and 60s, it's like nobody was talking about detoxifying your ama. And here we are now, and it's a pretty well-known kind of concept because Ayurvedic medicine has come and so many people are learning about it. And so even though it's still confusing, it's the beginning of a higher level of medical self-care. Now, the confusion is that people get the detox part correct, all right? But they miss the balancing of the Vata Pitta Kapha part, and they miss the supporting the Agni part. And so what ends up happening in popular culture is that detox is just wildly overdone without actually rebuilding the digestive fire and balancing Vata Pitta Kapha. So we're getting a piece of the puzzle, but we're focusing on it excessively. And that's one of the main things that I'm going to be stressing in the rest of this class, is all of these areas where we're doing it right, partly. We're doing parts of it right, and then we're doing a bunch of other things that that are not quite right. And so we can learn and we can progress. Okay, so that's just catching up a little bit from last week. And now let's go ahead and dive in here. And so the main things that I'm going to cover here are what internet medicine means and why it's linked to critical thinking, why we have to develop critical thinking if we're using the internet for medicine. And I'm going to talk about skillful uses of internet resources. And that's especially important when we're trying to sort things out, a lot of opinions and things. And again, I'm going to be presenting a system. The file that you have that has all of those links in it, consider that like a mandala, okay, of all of these people and organizations, schools and companies. And they represent like the core level of sanity in natural medicine on the internet. And so you can proceed safely and productively with this. And we also want to understand the most common trendy and wastebasket diagnoses, because those are the pitfalls. And, you know, I would say almost every consultation that I do with people, there's an aspect of a trendy or wastebasket diagnosis now. And there always has been, but it's becoming even more trendy and popular. So we also want to be able to identify between plausible and implausible causes of illness. This gets quite interesting because there are so many wild ideas that are out there now. And some of these are really intriguing, you know, and linked to conspiracy theories and how people are being controlled by satellites and things like that. So that's something that we should also use our discriminating awareness, intelligence about. And we also want to identify dangerous marketing claims about natural treatments. And I'm going to keep this real simple because there's a few areas that are really bad. And then the rest of it, it has more to do with just how we use things. And then there are common detoxification methods that really aren't that beneficial, but they're really popular. And then there's truthful and half-truthful and fictitious claims about natural cures. And the problem is that sometimes the claims can be all of those things. They can be truthful and half-truthful and fictitious all at the same time. And then you also want to know some resources for staying up to date with what's happening in the herb industry and how you can do some research with the scientific databases. All right. So let me give you a quick definition of what internet medicine means. Well, this is part of internet medicine, what we're doing. And I break it down into four main categories. One is education and research. Okay. Second is sources for products. The third is marketing. And then the fourth are groups, okay, forums, discussion groups, and things like that. And that's just a broad overview. But what makes the internet challenging is that all four of these categories are all over the place in terms of quality, okay? So you have sources of education, and some of those sources are top notch. Those are the ones I'm giving you. And then there's this absolute nonsense that's out there, okay? And what's amazing to me is that a lot of times the things that are just really not grounded in reality, they're the most popular. So it's something also to consider that, you know, we're really way more attracted to, there's actually some studies that have been done on this, and it has been found that humans are actually more interested in conspiracy theories than they are in reality. So it's important to understand that we have kind of a cognitive built-in weakness where we're more interested in excitement than we are in like what's really going on. And so we have to keep that in mind when it comes to the internet also. Then when it comes to the products, there are some really outstanding products, and there's a lot of mediocre products, and then there's poor quality. And with this information, you don't have to figure it out. I'm just telling you, here's the best. Then there is helpful marketing, and then there is fraudulent, dangerous marketing. And then there are these forums and these discussion groups, and these can be helpful, but a lot of times they just also can become these big echo chambers where people are just repeating the same misinformation over and over again. And so what the problem is that there's so much information. And that's really the whole purpose of these 2 hours, is just narrow it down. If you're interested in the field of natural medicine, here it is, all right? Just forget about everything else. Or approach it really critically, okay? And you should even approach what I'm showing you critically. So there's a lot of opportunity for spreading misinformation and marketing. And the main issue that we're really trying to overcome here, how do we take something that's really generic and make it personal, okay? Now, I'll just tell you briefly what I use for studying research and teachings, and some of the problems that are there, even in the things that I'm doing, because everything is sort of, the internet's a double-edged sword. So I use the internet for my consultations, and thank you for those of you who have been consulting with me. It's been a pleasure to meet you. And some of the things that I'll be talking about in this course, I'm introducing to you on a personal basis also. But there's also all of these new systems coming out, emerging telemedicine, conferences, services, lots of choices are there. And this is great. We need it right now, of course. It's not going to go away either, because it's a very, very important international, global form of communication. And it's a high level, meaningful use of the internet, okay? But with that, we do have to consider that one of the problems with that is that suddenly everybody's like a health coach, okay? And this is one of the main pieces of critical thinking, is look at people's credentials, all right? And who's been doing what and for how long, and where did they get their education? And is that information helpful to you? And most importantly, does it work? All right, now I don't believe that just because you are a top level expert that it means you're automatically going to help everybody you work with, okay? And I do know, and this is something I learned years and years and years ago, I do know, and I've seen over and over and over again, that simple people in villages everywhere in the world can oftentimes take care of some serious problems, and they don't have any medical background at all. They have more common sense, and they have a deep connection to the ethnobotanical systems that they grew up with, you see. So I don't feel that just because you got lots of, certificates on your wall, that means that you're going to actually get to the next level of being able to really help people. But it's something to consider. Now, another level here that I use is that I use the internet for teaching. Here we are. And there's a lot of online herbal education available, lots and lots of choices. And I gave you many links. You can stay busy for the rest of your life with just the links that I gave you, all right? But there's a downside to that. And that is that a lot of the education, especially the real high quality stuff, it can get expensive, and mostly it takes a lot of time. But are we serious students? That's the real question. And keep in mind, from class number 1, the more time, energy, and money and dedication we have, the more we can become our own self-care clinician, you see. And if we don't really have that, we can't really do that, then we do need other people to do it for us. And so in a certain way, like I said, we're kind of an elite group of people who are learning a new way of understanding medicine and self-care. So I use the scientific databases like PubMed and the things that I'll show you. There's lots of choices there. But the downside of this is the vast amount of information that you're going to find in even just one of them. And then what makes it even worse is the language. I mean, you're going to I mean, there are these studies, and I've gotten pretty good at reading some of the stuff, but there are some studies. I mean, I can literally read paragraph after paragraph and not understand a single thing that they are talking about because it is so specialized. But that's at an extremely technical level, you see, and there's lots and lots of studies that are real accessible to everybody, and I'll show you a few of the ways to connect to those. Next thing that I use it for is companies that produce herbal products and nutraceutical products, supplements. I use products from about 15 companies. I gave a list of the majority of those companies for you to look at, and we'll take a little tour of them also. And there's a wide range of herbal quality. The downside is that there's a wide range of quality outside of that group. Okay, these are companies that I have vetted them for years and years, all right? But outside of that, it's questionable. Then there's online sources for downloading books. Well, there's no problem with that. And then there's archives of special medical subjects like botanical monographs and old herbal books and things like that. There's no problems with that either. Except we could spend our whole life like reading, which is not a problem. And then there are the forums for the specific health topics. And these can be helpful, or they can just be a total waste of time. And then there are things that I used to refer people a lot to, and that's basically scheduling treatments in clinics and spas and with practitioners. But that's on hold for a lot of people. I do know a couple of places that are still active with very strict protocols. Now, let's talk a little bit about just critical thinking skills, and that'll take us into the bulk of our discussion about some of the complexities here. So critical thinking skills come from a basic questioning process, and we watch for certain kinds of red flags. So there's two fundamental levels that we can break down the information on the internet, medical information into. The research and the education, and then the information associated with products and marketing. Now, research and education, for the most part, tends to be relatively neutral, but where it gets complicated is when it's mixed up with a product, okay? And sometimes it's not just the education that's mixed up with the product is also mixed up with a celebrity, or, a health guru. And health gurus make a lot of money, sometimes just from one product also. And then the question that I encourage everybody to ask is that product that's being promoted as being good for everybody, how is that going to feel in my digestive system individually, number one? Then as you get better at thinking about it, you can think, well, is that particular product good for Vata, Pitta, or Kapha? Is that particular product really specific for me? That's the critical thinking part that we need to develop to make generic information personally relevant. And this entire, this entire course is really about that process. And knowing our self-diagnosis is the beginning, and knowing the good sources is the next part. So all 5 of these classes are really about how do we make something relevant to me? And at a certain level, all we can do is we have to try it. It's an experiment. But we can also experiment in a very careful, structured way and know what we're looking for. But before we get to that experiment, we can rule out a lot of other kinds of things that we don't need to even try. So the most important thing then, when we're finding ourselves confronted with, a teacher who is claiming that this particular piece of information is the key to everything in this product is going to solve it, is we have to ask, is that really neutral or not? What is the agenda? All right, and that's the key to figuring out a lot of this stuff. So there's all of these areas where critical thinking is completely necessary. And the main points are actually the topics for this class. Trendy wastebasket diagnosis. Okay, we've got to think those through and understand why they're trendy in wastebasket. How we personalize medicine. We have to understand that some things are plausible and some things are not plausible when it comes to causes and manifestations. We've got to watch for the dangerous marketing claims, and we've got to look for the detox methods that have little value and so forth. And so how do we actually know? I mean, there's a basic protocol that I put down. One is question everything. Be very skeptical, question everything. And then cross-reference everything, okay? So for example, if there's a product that you come across, you want to know a good quality product of turmeric, okay? Is this turmeric product good, all right? Well, the company is never going to say we have inferior grade turmeric. They're never going to tell you that we adulterate our turmeric. But adulteration of turmeric is widespread, actually, all right? And some of these standardization things that are on the bottle are just false. So then what do you do? Well, then if you know that you can actually go to the quality control websites where they're monitoring these kind of things, and then you can plug that in and you can find out. And one of the first things you're going to find really quickly is that a huge amount of turmeric is not high quality on the market. All right, so well, you can follow that through if you want, or just to save you time, I just gave you the places where you can get the high quality turmeric. So you go to the established, reliable places. And I have been working with this network, this mandala of these companies and people for so long. And I use these products. I know these people. So in a certain way, I'm just acting as your guide here, somebody who has been in this industry now for 40 years. But we also have to separate the science from the marketing, and that's where the databases are helpful. And for the most part, the scientific databases are fairly reliable. It's just that we have to learn how to use them. And if you use the links for the quality control places, you're going to learn a lot about herbal medicine. All right. So those are a few things, and I'm going to go ahead and I just want to switch over now. I want to put this up. I'm going to go ahead and let's see if I can shrink this down. Now I'm going to take you on a little tour of some of these websites, and I just want to show you that the things that I've just introduced, these are not things that are strange, esoteric, radical, innovative, anything like this. These are things that like even the allopathic websites have. So let me go ahead and put this up here. I want to show you just a couple examples here. Okay, so here's something on Medline, and this is one of the links that I gave you. Okay, so here's a guide to healthy web surfing. Okay, consider the source, use recognized authorities. All right, and so that's what I'm giving you, recognized authorities. But they give you a whole list here. Look for the about us. You know, is it from the government, nonprofit? And then it warns you about people who put up their personal sites after they've had their miraculous cures and so forth, and look at the quality, okay, and then be a skeptic, okay, because there is a lot of quackery, and actually I'm going to take you to the #1 source on quackery, and look for the medical research, and look for the latest information, and look for the bias, who's providing the funding, and don't give out your health information, all right? So that's a very simple thing to do. And now, now let me get myself out of this little maze of all of these files and folders here. And I wanted to show you another one. So you see, even Western medicine is concerned about this. So now let me see if I can do this. All right, hold on just a second here. All right, I'll probably get the hang of this and I'll go a little faster. So here's another one. These are just from some, standard allopathic sites, but here it is, a word of caution regarding medical information on the internet. And this is a nice outline, simple principles, lack of evidence. All right. Watch out for that. It goes back to current scientific literature. And, I have a strong opinion about this, that it is important to understand current scientific literature, okay? But I also want to add that current scientific literature is not the only source of authority here. Because if current scientific literature was the only source of medical authority, then what that would mean is that human beings had no real medical system for thousands of years. And we have had very highly effective medical systems for thousands of years. And as a matter of fact, I think there's a very high likelihood that if we could transport ourselves to most intact indigenous cultures around the world, we would probably find that those people were actually a lot healthier than we are in a lot of ways. So something to consider there, that current scientific literature is important, it is valid, but it is not the only source of authority, because Ayurveda has been around a long time. Traditional Chinese medicine knows a lot, okay? Botanical medicine has been used forever, and there's a huge amount of information about that. And where this is really strong is where these are coming together now, because current scientific literature is now proving that people in the past actually knew stuff. And so we can use traditional forms of medicine in addition to current scientific literature as authoritative. But what's best is when we can actually find something out from Ayurveda, and Ayurveda says, well, okay, turmeric is really good for this, and it's used like this, and it has this effect on Vata Pitta Kapha. And then you go over to PubMed and you plug in curcumin, and you find out there's like 1,600 studies on curcumin, okay? And so the whole statement that herbal medicine has no scientific validation, it's just total nonsense. Herbal medicine is actually far more studied in a lot of ways than the newest pharmaceutical drugs that have been coming out. So point number 2, lack of adequate context. This is important to consider. And then excessive use of jargon. I do agree with this. And then bias due to financial interests. All right, so these are all things that we just use to start with for what we could call just basic protocols. All right, so that we can actually do this effectively. Now, let's skip over to a few things here. Now I'm going to show you a few more things. So here I'm going to just give you a reminder. And like I said at the beginning of the first module, this course is really just taking all the things that I have said over and over and over again for the last 40 years, and I'm saying them once, okay? And even so, I'm saying them over and over in this class. And I'm answering all the questions that have come up. And so this is a little reminder here with some links. Don't take a medication without researching it first, okay? Now, it's applicable to herbs also. But here's the thing. You can research herbs and you will not find the list of side effects that come with the medications. Most herbs, if you look at them, the worst thing that they will do, most of the common herbs that we use, okay? There are some toxic herbs, yes, that's true. But for the most part, what It's commonly used in popular culture and in classical Asian medicine, most of it. The worst thing that's going to happen is it's going to upset your digestive system temporarily. All right, so I'm going to ask somebody, put a medication, name a medication, put it in the chat, and I'm going to show you how to do this. It's really simple. So don't take a medication without researching it first, okay? And if you're on a medication, research it anyway. And I will give you the real simple explanation of this, which is basically, if you research it before you start taking it, then two things will happen, okay? Give me the name of a drug, okay? Microdosing LSD. Okay, good. Nobody in this class is taking any, okay, good, here we go. Okay, good, all right, now they're all flooding in. They're all flooding in. Enough. Okay, so there's two main reasons why we do this exercise. One is if you study the drug first before you take it, you will probably feel motivation to not take it, okay? And then you will not be one of those people, and there are millions and millions and millions of Americans, all right? And multiply that all over the world. People don't even question what it is that they're taking. They just take this, oh, the doctor gave it to me, and they just take it, okay? But if you know what it could potentially do to you, then you might be more cautious about it. And if you understand the side effects, all right, you understand the potential side effects, that also tells you what it's doing to your body, even if you don't get those side effects, you see? Because if you see all these side effects that are associated with the drug, it means that, oh, it's affecting the organs in this particular way. Whether it manifests as a side effect or not, it has that potential, you see? So the other main reason to do this is if you are on a medication, or if you are studying it before you go on, either way, you're going to understand what the what potential side effects can come. And so if you start it and then suddenly you start to feel these things happening, a lot of times the reason that another drug is added to your routine is because it was not connected as being associated with the first drug, you see. But there's so many of these kind of things that happen. All right, let's go through this a step at a time here. All right, now I gave 3 websites, and all 3 of these websites have herbal information also. It's kind of an allopathic, simplistic overview. You know, whoever they've got working with them is not an advanced herbalist, but it's good basic information about herbs. And most of it is sort of in the category of people use this herb for this, but there's not enough evidence to support its use. But people have been using it for 1,000 years, but there's not enough evidence that it does anything. So that's kind of the allopathic mentality about herbs. So let's just go ahead here and, well, I introduced one to you last time. Let's go back to drugs.com. And so let me pull this up here. And put this in. All right. Let me switch over now. Okay, so this is how you do it, and I gave you a few of these websites. These are basically just like online drug encyclopedias. So here you go. All right, let's look at levothyroxine. Okay. Prescribing information. Okay. Why don't we look at side effects? We're looking for side effects. There we go. So this is all you have to do. You know, just pick your medication, plug this into one of those websites, And now here's where it gets really interesting and scary and depressing, alarming. Side effects requiring immediate medical attention. Here you go. Now, when it says less common, what does that mean? I mean, let's use critical thinking here. Less common. What is less common? Does that mean like it happens only 50% of the time? I mean, it's kind of a vague sort of statement here. Chest pain, decreased urine, difficult breathing, difficult swallowing, dilated neck veins, okay, extreme fatigue and fainting, irregular heartbeat, fever, heat intolerance. It just goes on and on. Menstrual changes, nausea, pain. But then it says rare. Okay, but it also doesn't tell us what is rare. Okay, is rare like 1%, 0.1%, 0.00001%, or is it like 5%? Blurred vision, dizziness, eye pain, seizures, severe headaches. Okay, and then get emergency help immediately if you have confusion and sudden loss of coordination. All right, and so forth. And how about side effects not requiring medical attention, like diarrhea, crying? That doesn't necessarily mean you have to go see a doctor, but something's not right. You're not going to feeling not well or unhappy, hair loss, mental depression. Don't call the doctors for hair loss. All right. But now here's the section for the doctors. And this is where it gets into some of the more serious things. Here's one: frequency not reported. Okay, heart attacks. So I think you understand the point that I'm trying to make here. All right. Now, the point that I want to make again is that if these drugs have the capacity to affect every organ system that dramatically, to affect the brain, to affect the liver, to affect the heart, to affect everything so dramatically, that means that it's a miracle they don't cause side effects to everybody all the time. But then the question comes, maybe they do, and we're just not noticing them, you see. And so then what we have to look at is the bigger context here. And this is where you always have to remember that the longer you are on a medication, the more of an impact it has had on your body, okay? And that can be a big contributing factor to things much later in life. So I gave you an example last week where I said, look, you take antibiotics in childhood, it's going to affect the gut microbiome in such a way that it's going to continue on. And so if you took them as a girl, it's going to impact the onset of your menstrual cycle because the gut microbiome is linked to the hormonal balance, you see. And then it's going to lead to going on the birth control pill, and that's going to lead to liver toxicity, and these things multiply, you see. And so that's another perspective, another reason why we should have this understanding of the medications, okay? All right, now I'm going to take you on a tour of the fun part, which is going to be the herb companies. And I want to start off by reiterating something that I said on the question and answer call. And that is that a lot of times we don't actually need to have a personal consultation to get a formula. And what we can say here is that there's 4 stages basically of finding an herbal product for us. And that goes from the least personalized to the most. And so those of you who are on the call, you remember this, but now I'm going to show you what I mean. And the lowest level, least personalized, is you basically go onto Google and you just put in herbs for hot flashes. All right. And you're going to get all these products. You don't know who the companies are. You don't know the quality. You're going to see some herbs over and over again. Oh, maybe it's black cohosh this, or maybe it's some other thing. But it's really generic and you don't know much about it. Now, the next thing that you can do, and this is probably information for some of you, and for those of you who don't know this, this is really a pretty helpful process that you can do. You can go to a reputable herb company and you can buy a formula that they make, and it's symptomatic, but it's more individualized. And what you have done is you have basically taken care of 2 areas of uncertainty and ambiguity where you could run into problems. Okay, so first of all, you're going to go to one of the herb companies that I told you about, so you know that they're good. And then second, you're going to go and you're going to see what products they make for a particular symptom. And almost all of the companies that I am referring you to, they have their products organized according to system and function, you see. And so it's like now you can actually go online to these high quality companies and you can just get your own pharmacy of things. Now there's some real benefits of doing it this way. One is quality control is already taken care of. I'm referring you. Second is that something is formulated with really state-of-the-art naturopathic herbal information. And the third benefit is that when you look at the formulas, you're going to start to understand what the ingredients are and how different herbalists are thinking and they're putting things together. Now, what you're going to find is that you're going to see a lot of similarities, okay, between the formulations. And you're going to see that, okay, all these companies, they're using the same 2 or 3 herbs as a core formula, but then the different companies are using different adjunct herbs in different ways. And that's going to give you a good herbal education, all right? Now here, I want to interject one of my personal observations and teachings about this particular way of going shopping for an herbal product. And that is that when you buy one of these products, advantage, good quality, it's formulated for a symptom, most likely it will be beneficial. But here's the thing. You may have some discomfort in your digestive system, and you won't know what's causing it if you're taking a formula, okay? So what I prefer to do, and those of you who have been getting consultations with me know how I do this, is that I will give people a pharmacy list of individual herbs. And then I will suggest start with one herb at a time. So what I suggest you do then is you go and you look at a formula and we'll go shopping for something. Okay, so somebody put in something that they want to shop for, okay? A symptom that you have a concern about, all right? So well, all right, let's just look at thyroid support. Okay, we'll do that. Several of you put in thyroid. So let's look at thyroid support formulas, okay? And then what we can do is we'll see the commonality, but then what we're going to do, if you follow my principles here, is you buy the individual herbs in that formula, and then you take the herbs one at a time, and you check them out, and you make sure everything's comfortable. Then you can start to combine them yourself. And there's another advantage to doing this, which is that you can take much higher doses, okay, of the herbs that really are the most important, okay? And that way, you can also reduce the cost quite a bit because you can buy the individual herbs in a larger volume. Okay, so the next level up from that, just to finish this, is that if that particular approach of a formula, and especially if you take the herbs apart, if that's not enough, then you can do some further education and delve into the self-diagnosis a bit more carefully. And that's where knowing Vata, Pitta, Kapha and your digestive system sensitivities and all of that, that's where it becomes increasingly important. But then finally, the fourth level is that if you're still not understanding it, you're trying things, you're still not understanding cause and effect, that's where you can really start to do the clinical level education and research. And that's where the educational sources I'm going to give you come in. All right, so let's do this. Let me do a couple of sites here that I'm going to refer you to. And I'll just tell you, I have really pretty strict criteria with these. I've known these people for a very long time. The people who started these, I've known these companies a long time. I've done business with these companies a long time. I've used their products a long time, including for myself. And they all have very high quality ingredients. They're all ecologically sensitive. Many of them have their own sustainability initiatives. These are leaders in the field. They are frequently also hosting and sponsoring some of the biggest naturopathic and herbal conferences. And they're fully equipped for quality control. So these people meet all the criteria. Let's go ahead and all right. Here's one that I've sent many of you over to my friend David Winston. And he's a very well-known herbalist. And this is the company that he created, and they're now on, he runs it sort of from a distance. But let me just give you a quick overview here. One of the other advantages of working with these companies is that they have extensive educational resources inside the website, all right? And so you will see here that I'm looking for his educational. All right, well, here you can see that the products are organized by condition, okay? I don't see his the link to his educational stuff here. Let's see, where is it? Educational resources. Okay, here it is. Educational resources. So here it is. You get done with this course, you can spend the next 10 years studying his stuff, all right? And here's his Center for Herbal Studies. Comprehensive Clinical Herbalist Training Program. Well, how many of these kind of places are out there? Well, there's a lot, okay? What you want to meet is you want to meet the experts in the field, all right? And these are the main people. So he's a top guy. Let's look at thyroid. So here's a choice. You can adrenal balance, you can look at metabolic support, and then you have all of these individual herbs. And that's a nice thing about the way this is organized, is that the individual herbs that are going to pop up are related. But let's look at maybe this cute play on words, the thyroid compound. And here's an example of your basic herbal education. So hyperthyroid, you see, the main game that we have to play with the FDA is that the FDA doesn't allow us to say anything. So we have to come up with these tricky names, all right? So thyroid compound, all right, well, it tells you enough that it's going to calm your thyroid. And then you go and you look at it, and bugleweed and lemon balm and motherwort. Those three are the three core herbs that are used for hyperthyroid symptoms, all right? And that also crosses over with not just with hyperthyroid, because the symptoms of hyperthyroid can be treated with these three herbs. But these three herbs treat all kinds of other associated conditions that have excess stimulation metabolically in them. Okay, let's see what else we have. I'm looking for something that is really very specific for tonifying, for hypo. So I don't see something there, but let's go over to the next side. Let's go over to GaiaHerbs.com. Okay, so here we go. And so this is another one that's on your list. And let's shop by condition, by health interest. And where are we going to find thyroid? Immune, brain, cognitive, liver, cleanse, women, men, glycemic. Okay. I thought for sure that they had, well, let's go back and plug this into there. Oops. Let's go back and plug this in, and let's just say thyroid. Oh, there it is. Okay, thyroid support. And so here's a new idea for you. Okay, ashwagandha and seaweed and kelp and schizandra. All right. So that's how we can do that. is that you just go shopping for the products according to condition. But I also want to show you a couple other of the main ones. Oops. And I'll tell you, I'll tell you the strengths and weaknesses, in my opinion, of these companies. Now, Herb Farm has massive distribution, and they also have things according to functions, okay? And they have really good formulas, and they have a really big selection of herbs, okay? And I would say they're an excellent herb company. Now, Gaia Herbs has far less in terms of products that are available, not such a big inventory line, but what they do have are really, really excellent, okay? And also, both of these companies do have good educational resources, but what I would say is unique about Herbalist and Alchemist is David Winston's formulating expertise, okay? Now, all of these companies have expert formulators, all right? But I do refer people to Herbalist and Alchemist quite a bit for some of those special things. And David has also a lot of background in Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, so you'll find that he actually makes compounds using some of those herbs as well. Now, I want to show you another one of my favorites. Dragon Herbs. Now, the reason that I send people to Dragon Herbs is because Ron Teagarden has been specializing in adaptogens and tonics for 40 years, and he has definitely by far the best extracts and definitely the biggest selection of weird stuff you've never heard about. Okay, so if you want to experiment with strange things, if you want to try like a concentrated extract of ants for super strength power, okay, well, he's the guy. Okay, why don't we look that up? Actually, let's look up ant power. Okay. Ooh, there it is, ant power. Okay, it's a potent Jing tonic. Now, here's the thing about Dragon Herbs is that all of this is going to be in Chinese medical language, and this is a great source for good Chinese medical education. Also, he does a lot of education online. So you look at this, and all right, it's not just any ants. Okay, it's the mountain ant. Okay, and well, why would you want to take ants? Because because it optimizes sexual functions and it's superb for athletes. And why is it superb for athletes? Well, this is Chinese thinking. Ants can carry 10,000 times their own body weight. Okay, so you consume a bunch of ants and then you can do that. So that wasn't what I meant to show you here. I wanted to show you a few of the main things that I refer people to that you can't get anywhere else, okay? The tonics in general, the adaptogens, these are definitely superior extracts. And that includes astragalus and American ginseng. And let's look at reishi. Okay, now his collection of reishi is very, very interesting, okay, because reishi is not one species, it's all kinds of things. So he's got Dwanwood reishi, and he's got organic purple reishi, and he's got wild red reishi, and it just goes on and on. So there's all kinds of reishi. And then a couple other things. Well, I should probably wrap this up because I'm not even halfway through the lecture yet. Let's look at something else. Here's something special. You're not going to find it anywhere else. Wild Himalayan rhodiola. Okay, cook in soup. So I frequently advise people to cook a lot of these tonics in soups. And this is classical Chinese herbology, is that you cook these kinds of things. And so rhodiola, you know, is a very powerful adaptogen, but the Himalayan is a different species and has unique properties. And I want to show you one more thing here. This is something that I have recommended to a lot of people, especially women. It's a red mushroom, and you can cook it in soups, and it's a blood tonic. Okay, So those are a few things, and let me go ahead and just go back to my list here because I've got to move on or we're going to be here till 11 o'clock California time, which is far too late for Sherry. And I want to just give you a quick overview of some of the other companies here. This is on your file. Hawaii Farm. The reason that I refer people to Hawaii Farm is that they have by far the biggest list, the largest inventory of unusual herbs you cannot find anywhere else, okay? Now for bulk herbs, I tell people to get them from Pacific Botanicals or Mountain Rose. All that matters is you get something that's organic and high quality, okay? And then there's all of these Ayurvedic resources here, all right? And let me do this. I am going to now have to decide what am I going to talk about because I gave you too much. I way overdid it. So let's do this. Let's skip ahead to the medical stuff that I wanted to cover. You can look at all of these links, get a sense, and then you can post some questions during the week, and we can review this a little bit next time. But what I wanted to show you next are some of the real complicated issues that we have to be aware of. And these are things that come up over and over again. It's one of the reasons that we have to be very careful. And so now what I'm doing is I'm shifting away from the internet to clinical practice, but they're closely related because a lot of these things that you hear about in clinical practice, they're all over the internet now and vice versa. And so what I want to talk about next are the common trendy and wastebasket diagnoses, all right? And I want to show you a few things that are going to be common things that you're going to see if you do various types of tests. Now, I'm going to give you a list of things, and you've probably heard these things. You've probably been diagnosed with these things. And then I'm going to just take it apart and I'm going to say, all right, what value do these things, what do these diagnoses and treatments mean? So the things that are really trendy these days and the things that are frequently also wastebasket diagnosis, which is kind of the same thing, SIBO, all right? Small intestine bacterial overgrowth, heavy metals, leaky gut, parasites, candida, and then MTHFR gene mutation, okay, which is the methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, and big wastebasket diagnosis of you need to detox. Okay, now if we take all of those things that I just mentioned, that's a lot of what people are being diagnosed with nowadays. All right, now that's in the naturopathic world. Now, of course, the naturopathic world does not diagnose only that, okay? But these are the main things that a lot of practitioners are focusing on in the attempt to actually treat fairly complicated things. And there's justifiable reasons for doing that, all right? But here's the thing where it gets confusing is that a lot of these things have relevance, but the question is how relevant and in what order do we treat these and what happens if we focus on these? That's where the discussion is going off track a little bit. Now, these things being trendy in naturopathic medicine, that's not the only sorts of trendiness. In naturopathic, allopathic medicine has its own trendiness too. So it used to be, even just a few years ago, that if a woman turned 50 years old, you just went on hormone replacement therapy. It was just a given. And now, of course, they just hand out Ritalin to the kids like candy. So these are things that we have to consider also. Now, the information that I wanted to share with you here is I want to show you some typical tests that you might see, and I want to kind of take them apart and ask, well, okay, what do these actually mean? So I'm going to open up this one. And this was a test that came in recently, actually. You might even recognize your own test here, but I'm not going to say who it is. And so this is a heavy metal test, all right? And this is a really typical thing that you see. I mean, if you go to a naturopathic doctor, they're going to include a heavy metal test a lot of times, okay? And it's so common that I imagine that almost all of you have seen these kind of tests, that you probably have some version of them. Now, there's two basic types of tests. One is the hair analysis, and then the other is the ear analysis. Okay, these are the ones that are done the most. And what I'll say is, you can pretty much throw out the hair analysis tests. All right, they're not really that helpful because all kinds of environmental things get in the hair. And the one thing that they do seem to be helpful for is showing longer term levels of cortisol. All right, that's kind of about the limit. But these urinalysis tests, you know, I see these things several times a week that people are bringing in, and so this is not unique. There's nothing unique about this at all. All right, and so what you're going to see then is you're going to see these different levels, and it's always, almost always, I would say over 90%, people have one or more metals in the higher range, okay, in the urine, and the urine is more reliable than the hair. So now when we're looking at this, okay, now we have to say, well, if this is so common, what does it actually mean? What are we going to do with this information? All right. Now, what happens with this information is what I'm concerned about, which is that this information is then taken, and in that last test, for example, there were high lead levels, okay? The question is, what are you going to do with that finding? High lead. Okay, now what? Okay, the problem is when a finding like that, which is so common that everybody has metals, when it becomes the diagnosis and the treatment, because the treatment of heavy metals is really serious, okay? Chelating heavy metals out of the body is serious business, and it can make people really sick, okay? And so therefore, the question that has to be asked is this lead a primary cause? Is it the primary cause of this particular condition, or is this high level of mercury or this high level of cadmium or this combination? Is it what is the main culprit causing the illness, and is this what needs to be removed from the body, and is removing it going to change the condition, or is it going to make it worse because chelation is toxic? That's the set of questions that we have to ask. And what I can say from clinical practice here is that since heavy metals are so ubiquitous, and since the actual cases rarely have anything to do with the actual heavy metal poisoning syndromes and symptoms, it is not something that we want to focus on as a primary cause or a primary treatment. So where does that change? You come in and your lead levels are off the charts and you have the symptoms of lead poisoning, okay? That's when it's different. And furthermore, you have a history where you know that you were exposed to lead. Then everything starts to connect, okay? Then you can say, all right, I was exposed to lead, I have high lead levels, and I have symptoms and signs and evidence and proof that I have lead poisoning. Then that becomes your primary diagnosis and your main focus for treatment, okay? But the thing is that you go through every one of those metals. Every one of those metals has a specific kind of disease it causes. Mercury toxicity, radionuclides, cadmium poisoning, titanium, every single one of them has a unique presentation of a metal poisoning, and it is almost never the case where you see the metal associated with the illness. Okay, so I think that that's fairly clear in terms of a logical, rational way of looking at this. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over and, well, let me just finish the whole discussion here. Does that mean that heavy metals are not a problem? No, it means heavy metals are a problem, but are they the problem? Most of the time, no. All right, so I hope that that helps clarify some things. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the parasite equivalent of that, all right? Because we have the same thing happening with parasites. And I would say that between the heavy metals and the parasites, you can pretty much just put everybody, in the wastebasket diagnosis now, because these are so common. Now, both of these are real medical conditions, and both of these really do require some thinking here. But let me put this back on the screen. And now I want to show you the parasite version, what you're going to get. Okay, so there's a lot of different places, and I gave a link to the place that I work with, Dr. Omar Amin, Parasitology Center, world expert in parasitology. I worked with him for many years in my own clinical practice. We referred people back and forth. I have the greatest respect. And there's also other places. So what you're looking for here is some clarification, some confusion is happening because of bacterial overgrowth. That's what I want to address here. And if you have this kind of test, then there's going to be different things that they're looking for. This is like stool sample, all right? So first of all, parasites. Okay, so now I'm going to just jump right in here, and I'm going to say something provocative, just in case, since we have the opportunity to talk about a big misunderstood topic here, all right? And what I'm going to say that's provocative to some people is I'm going to say there is no such thing as a parasite cleanse. Okay, now some people, they might get offended by that, and they would argue, and they would say, well, no, here's my product. This is a parasite cleanse, and this has all of this background and so forth. But here's my thinking. All right, when I say there is no such thing as a parasite cleanse, what I mean is that parasitology is an exact science. In order to treat parasites, you first need a specific diagnosis of the organism, confirmed presence of the parasitic organism. And then you need generally a specific course of medication for it. And almost always, herbal medicine has a secondary supportive role. And so, therefore, parasitology is the diagnosis of a specific organism and the treatment with a pharmaceutical drug of a specific organism. And that's going to be provocative to everybody who says, well, I can clean these things out. I see them in the toilet and I get rid of them, and I know how to flush them out. But the thing is, that's not how real parasites operate, okay? So if you do a product that is a parasite cleanse and you don't know what's in there, then how do you know what you're treating, okay? So anything that comes with a product, it's a parasite cleanse, all right? It's going to have a systemic, generalized, shotgun, non-specific kind of approach. That doesn't mean that it's ineffective, and it doesn't mean that it's bad. A couple different things could happen. One is you could actually flush your intestines out and you could get rid of the parasites, even without knowing that you had them, or even without knowing the organism, you could get rid of them, okay? But on the other hand, you might just feel better temporarily because you flushed out your system, but the parasites didn't actually leave, all right? That's one possibility. Another possibility is you never had parasites and you've got some other underlying condition, and those herbs actually helped you feel better temporarily, but they didn't really restore healthy bowel function. All right. So that's all of these different conversations that I have with people. And so in this particular case, this test was used by a naturopathic doctor to initiate a program of very strong attacking herbs to treat SIBO. And so when I saw this test, I said, what's the proof that there's SIBO here? Okay. And so first, what are the expected findings for ova and parasites? There should be no ova or parasites, no red blood cells, no white blood cells, and very little yeast. Okay. And so what's the anticipated values for yeast? Okay. Moderate to heavy. Okay. No yeast here. Okay. Then what are the expected findings? Moderate to heavy growth of gram plus and negative. Moderate to heavy growth are expected findings. Okay. And so here it is, heavy growth. These are expected. All right. And so then the question is, what about this list of these bacteria? And here's the thing. Every person has some pathogens in their gut. Everybody's got pathogens on their skin. Everybody's got pathogens in their mouth, okay? So again, the question is the same as the heavy metals. Is it enough to attack? Is it the primary cause of everything that's happening? What are the consequences of attacking? Well, it just so happened that the person who was taking these very strong bitter herbs for attacking these pathogens for SIBO, the digestive symptoms were getting worse and worse and worse. Okay, so as you can see, I have opened up a very big subject, and I thought I was going to be able to cover it in 2 hours, but we're going to have to roll this over. And so I'm going to give you a little homework. And your homework is go through all the different links. And let me also mention that you have a link to the Parasitology Center. So I think that this class is actually a record for me of over preparation, that I have so many things that I didn't cover. We will squeeze them in. I always make it work somehow. But here's what you can do to make it go faster to help me out here. Look at all the links during the week, and that will give you a really good idea of the various kinds of things that we're looking for. And they're also classified there on your file into what category. So let me pull that up. I'll just put this up real quickly for everybody to look at. And then I'm going to move over to the questions, and some really good questions have come in. So this is your homework, okay? You already had, I introduced you to a little bit of web surfing stuff. Visit the other herb companies. And what I would like you to do is not just look around at their individual herbs. I want you to look at their formulas, okay? And I want you to do a homework assignment based on what you might need, all right? And so I want you to make this a targeted research project to find the products that have the most likelihood of being directly applicable for you. And you can do it by system and by condition in most of these places. And just have fun over at Dragon Herbs, looking at all the unusual stuff. Look at the Ayurvedic resources. Banyan Botanicals is associated with Dr. Lad, okay? And they have a lot of education. They will be able, that website will be able to help you put together a bit more of the Vata Pitta Kapha conundrum, because their products are organized according to treating Vata Pitta Kapha. Same with Tri-Health Ayurveda. Then the National Ayurvedic Medical Association has a huge it's a big portal into all kinds of things. And they have links to all kinds of other Ayurvedic companies and Ayurvedic educational stuff. Some of these companies, and this is an exercise that I was going to do, but I'll just let you check this out. I don't know these companies, and what I was going to do was I was going to go through these and I would just share my thinking, what I look for. Ayurvedic Institute is Dr. Lad, excellent education, of course, California College of Ayurveda, and then there's a good source for Chinese herbs and formulas. And then the educational resources, and this is definitely something we'll cover again next week. These are the three major places that I recommend you go for an extensive amount, huge amount of high quality information. Botanicalmedicine.org has presentations twice a year, conferences they've been doing for over 20 years with all of the top naturopathic and herbal people, okay? If you meet this community of herbalists, you know all the top people, all right? Then the American Herbalist Guild, same thing, all right? It's even more of those top people. And both of these places have lots and lots of events, articles, blogs, videos, audio courses, all sorts of things. Institute for Traditional Medicine Online is very interesting. This is Subhuti Dharmananda, and he is a longtime practitioner and educator of classical Chinese medicine, but he's got a strong background in allopathic medicine also. Parasite testing is there. And if you want to get into some of the issues about quality control, the big quality control issue is unsafe use of essential oils. And so National Association for Holistic Aromatherapy, I want you to look at these links for the adverse reactions at the Tisserand Institute and at Aromatherapy United. And then herbal quality control, there's two links there. Then you've got the medical databases. I'll spend a little bit more time with this next week. And we covered the drug and medication and herb research links. And then just for fun, I was going to give you a tour of the most biased overview of questionable products and health claims, and that's Quackwatch, okay? So you might know Quackwatch, but the reason that I wanted to show you Quackwatch is because it's a very interesting exercise in critical thinking, because this guy's full of contradictions, all right? And so, you know, it's like he wants everything to be totally scientific, but then he rejects all the stuff that actually has a lot of science, like herbal medicine. So we'll talk about that next week, but that's a little bit of amusement for you. Okay, so we have things to catch up on, and no worries, this happens. We always get it done, but I hope that you enjoy this, and I actually do have more things to say about some of the dangers that we want to watch out for. But I did squeeze in enough information to at least maybe provoke some thinking about some of these, a couple of these medical conditions that are confusing to everybody. Okay, because if you are going to a naturopathic practitioner now, even medical doctors, even functional medical clinics are really focusing a lot on the metals and the parasites and all of that. And my position on this is, let's put it in perspective and let's really find out, is this really the cause? And in some cases it is, and that's what's confusing about it. But we really have to sort it out. And if there's one thing that you can take away from this whole discussion, is put it in perspective, you know, and really find out. Because if you really know that you've got a parasite, that's one thing. But if somebody's just telling you you have a parasite and they're trying to link it to your condition and there's no evidence of it, then that's another thing, you see. So I'm highly rational in this particular discussion.